So I've been stuck indoors for the past week or two, and so that means I've basically just been scrolling social media, a lot of Reddit and Instagram, looking at the coolest new guns that are out there and the different attachments and all that. And so it made me wonder though, I see so many of these different videos of reviews and so many of these different items come up. How many of them do you really need? It kind of got me wondering about that. You know, you'll see a lot of times top 5 upgrades that you must have for your AR in 2025. The newest muzzle device or whatever, or newest optic for your Glock. How many of those do you actually need, or am I just kind of feeling the itch to buy some of those? Clearly by the title of this video, you already know what I think, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that today because I think every time a wave of new products comes out, it really feels like, you know, there are a handful which truly are really big improvements and that are worth paying for. But I also feel like there's an equal, if not more amount where sometimes these products are solutions in search of a problem. And so I want to talk a little bit more about why I think you don't always need the newest, latest and greatest stuff to be a great shooter and to have a great gun. Now, one of the first things that I want to talk about is the idea that simplicity is key when setting up your guns. At least in my experience, it is. I feel like when I see a bunch of new products drop, then eventually you see a bunch of pictures or videos on YouTube, I've noticed that there can be a lot of very cluttered guns out there. They have their original setup, then the new product comes out and they decide to add to it. And usually I've noticed that means you can have very busy rifles or busy pistols. And so while this isn't strictly related to the newest things, I want to drive home the point that I think having something simple is at the heart of this whole discussion. I remember when I first started shooting, I almost felt silly not having a really busy, really decked out kind of gun, because that's always what I would see when I was looking online. And I thought I was almost weird because I wanted to just have a very straightforward light sling and optic or sight or whatever on my pistol and my rifle, and that would be it. But the more I started shooting and the more I got comfortable with the idea of, going to the range and putting in some range time, I really started to believe that, having my guns only as complicated as they need to be and really understanding what I'm going to use it for is really what's going to make me the best shooter and have the best time at the range and frankly save and spend my money wisely. And beyond that, it's nice to have as few attachments as possible because then you arguably have a lighter gun as well. So you don't constantly have to work with, so many different attachments that you may not need. You only have what you need and nothing more. So instead of trying to make my guns really complicated and have one gun fit every single scenario under the sun, what I ended up doing is I just decided of these guns, what do I want each of them to achieve? And then how am I going to set them up appropriately to make sure that they're successful in whatever their mission will be. So when I was building this M4, I knew what I was going to use it for. First, obviously, there's the nostalgia part, but from the practical standpoint, I knew I wanted to have a kind of a short to mid-length distance rifle that I could use for home defense, but also have it be modular enough that if I do want to have some fun and stretch it out to 300-400 yards, I have the ability to swap my optics. But rather than putting a bunch of different things on there, in its current setup, what I always do is I have a light, I have a sling, and then I have an optic that fits the goal of what I wanted to achieve, and that's it. And for me, this has worked very well. And you can set up your guns in many different ways, like this M4. This is just one example of not trying to keep things too complicated. Again, keeping it as simple as possible while still being effective has been really great, and I think that'll help a lot of people too. Now, of course, there's always the idea that depending on what you're going to use your gun for, you might not always know what situation you'll find yourself in. I think there's always going to be a degree of flexibility needed when you decide what to purchase to put on your gun. But, for at least the average dude who shoots a weekend and really it's going to be concealed carry or home defense, I have an idea overall of what I would use my gun for, and I just make the best choices I have with the information I have on hand to make my gun successful. Now, the second thing I want to mention is that having the newest things isn't always the best for you, but also having the newest things is also not always a bad thing. I'm going to do a section after this to talk about all the disclaimers and downsides and counter arguments to what I've said so far, but bear with me for now. But the point I'm trying to make is, again, you don't always need the newest stuff and always constantly have to upgrade what you have in order to be really effective at shooting. I think it's practice that matters most, and the equipment will hopefully complement that. Now on my gun, you can see that I chose a very popular optic, the ACOG. Everyone knows it, a lot of people love it, but it's definitely considered to be a dated optic by today's standards. We have many different things out there like LPVOs or MPVOs or just other optics that you can use, but I've chosen to do this one. Now, why did I do that? Is one, because it's cool. I like how it looks, but from a practical standpoint, again, I knew what I would be using this for and that it was acceptable, and I knew I wouldn't have to constantly upgrade my optic in order to, be able to still use my rifle adequately. Now, are there optics with better eye relief? Or are there optics with variable zoom instead, where I can zoom in and out as opposed to this fixed full power? Yeah, absolutely, there are. But again, as I just said, moments ago, I think it's really practice that comes down to what makes the difference here. Yes, you have an optic which is great, and there are some optics which could arguably be better, but as long as you know what you have, and you're practicing with it, you're making sure you're familiar with the equipment you have in your gun, that is really, in my opinion, what is going to make the difference. You can only buy your way so far into becoming a better shooter. In terms of how I actually decide whether I need to upgrade my parts or whether it's just me wanting something that's new and shiny, which there's nothing wrong with, by the way, I've done that plenty of times to buy things that just because I wanted to, is I ask myself, okay, this new thing that I'm looking at, how is it better than what I have now, and how am I going to use it more effectively? And if it is better, by how much? Is this something that really offers a huge, groundbreaking, different, advantage over what I have already on my gun? Or is this mostly just a marginal improvement that kind of covers up a skill issue that I could really just spend more time practicing at the range and then I can overcome it and not have to buy this thing? Now, I think sometimes this can come across a little bit maybe too pragmatic. Guns are a very expensive hobby and lifestyle, and so on one hand that means you should be pragmatic, but on the other hand, if it's something you like and it's something you want, then yeah, there's nothing wrong with splurging or at least buying the newest thing if that's within your budget and if you want to. I don't think also you always have to be, it fits a certain purpose. Sometimes if you want to get it, yeah, I think it's fine, but it's also wise to really kind of try to rationalize first why you're actually getting it. Now, the last thing I'll say for this part in terms of newest not always being best, before I get to all the caveats to what I'm saying, one thing that sticks to me a lot is that I recognize that people have fought in wars before with arguably worse guns than what I have now, and they still did fine. So do I always need to have the best thing out there? No, not necessarily, because people with older guns have achieved a lot more than I have. Now, on that point, I'm also going to transition to this next part, which is that newest can be good, because at the time of those people fighting those wars, those were probably the newest guns and the best tech that they had. So I also want to talk about times where I could be wrong with what I'm saying. First, I want to make it very clear that I'm not advocating that buying the newest things or having the newest things are bad. Technology improves for a reason, and it would be silly to discard them just because. If you really want to take my argument as far as possible, we'd still be using guns from the 1700s, but for really obvious reasons, we're not doing that anymore. So yeah, it's good to upgrade and it's good to have things that give you an advantage, and those are typically newer things. All I'm trying to say is you don't always need to get everything new every time. It's also going to depend a lot on what specifically we're talking about. If you want different types of ammo, if you want to have a rangefinder, if you want to go from iron sights to a red dot, or maybe you want to have body armor or night vision, these are all technically upgrades from what, is considered just like base or bare bones, but they all have huge advantages. So clearly there are times where getting those things are very important and are truly beneficial to you, but it all just depends on what you are going to use them for. I also think it is a good idea to stay up to date with what are the newest items that are out there, because usually you see trends in the market from doing that. We see shorter guns, slimmer guns for concealed carry, and like subcompacts really starting to take off. You see different compensators or different types of sights. Maybe you don't necessarily need to buy every single one, but you get the direction the market's headed and where, again, where it's going to go. Those are things I do think are important to keep up to date with. And if you do end up getting that new cool thing, awesome, it's up to you. It's your hard-earned money. It's not for me to tell you what to do. I sometimes just try to be the voice of reason for myself. So go out there, get whatever you need to get, you know, as long as you practice with it so you become very effective. I think that truly is what matters most. So that'll do it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we can get out to the range soon. I should be going in a few days because the weather is really clearing up, and I'm trying a new shooting spot, which would be pretty cool. So hopefully everything goes well. Really excited to take you guys along, and I will catch you guys in the next one.